everyone, and welcome back to the Potara Podcast. And this is a precursor for one of my 4 reboot subscriber milestones, titled What If My Hero Academia and Yu-Gi-Oh! Combined? This is a rebooted version of What If MHA and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX combined. I'm from my main channel that never received a continuation, mainly due to how poorly it performed compared to the Pokemon What Ifs. Also, this isn't MHA being combined with any specific Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, but Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. Just so I don't get a lot of comments saying, but insert cards as archetypes here didn't exist back then. Now, this part isn't really a part of the story, it just exists as a way for me to explain the decks for all the characters, a brief summary of why I picked those decks for each character, and the character's ace cards. Just so we don't have to cram it all into part 1. Also, I'm going to try and keep this part brief since we have almost 90 decks to cover. So, I'd like you to know that I have another Pokemon our channel for Pokemon What If content, so if you like that sort of thing, the link is in the description. Also, you can support the channel by joining the Patreon for just $3 a month, where you'll be able to get early access to all of my content and access to any supporter exclusive series I may do. So now with that out of the way, let's get right into the decks. Also, again, since we have almost 90 decks to cover, I'm not going to go too crazy with the visuals for this part, so just figured I'd let you know. Alright, we're kicking off this discussion with Class 1A. And who better to start off the list than with our green-haired MC, Izuku Midoriya, aka Deku. And for his deck, I have decided to give him Synchrons, as well as the Stardust Dragon cards. As for why I picked this deck, and for him, I think the Synchron archetype can work similarly to how One For All works in canon. As for Deku's ace card, I decided to have it be Stardust Dragon. Since Deku's the pro tag, he's gotta have an ace monster with 2,500 attack points, since it's pretty much an unspoken rule that Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro tags have to have an ace monster 2,500 attack points. Yuga doesn't count for this rule as his 7's Road Magician only has 2,100 attack points. Up next is Bakugo, and he'll be getting the Red Dragon Archfiend and the Resonator archetypes, as these two archetypes just go hand in hand, as I haven't seen a successful Red Dragon Archfiend deck that doesn't run Resonators. Plus, this deck is focused on pure power, so I'd say the deck is a perfect fit for him. Bakugo's ace is Starlight's Red Dragon Archfiend, as between the 3 main Red Dragon Archfiend synchros, it has the best effect, in my honest opinion, as once a turn, it can destroy any of your opponent's special summon monsters that have less attack points than its own, and blast your opponent with 500 points of damage for each one. Plus, Bakugo is basically the Kaiba in this What If, so he is going to need an ace with 3,000 attack points. Bakugo isn't exactly like Kaiba. I'm just using Kaiba as an example for the rival characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Next up is Todoroki, and for him, I decided to give him 2 different decks. One deck of ice, and one deck of fire. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking, couldn't you just make it a half fire, half ice deck? And I did think of that route, but I realized there isn't really any fire and ice focused archetypes that have good synergy with each other. For Shoto's ice deck, I decided on ice barriers, since I feel like it's one of the better ice archetypes. Plus the fact that they recently got some new support with their structure deck. As for the ace of this deck, I have decided to go with Trishula. Dragon of the Ice Barrier, as it's not only a part of the archetype, but it's also a rather powerful card, even being on the ban list for 2 years. As for Shoto's fire deck, I decided to go with Salamangreats. I originally gave this deck to Endeavor, but with the added hindsight I've gained over the last couple years, I figured this deck should go to Shoto instead. Plus, I needed something with a lot of firepower due to the nature of Shoto's quirk. As for Shoto's ace, I decided on Salamangreat Pyro Phoenix, as it's a rather powerful card, since if you link summon it using a copy of itself, you can obliterate your opponent's field. Next is Momo, and she's getting triple Ds. I already know someone's gonna make that joke. And I know this deck isn't really based off her quirk, but rather her intelligence. Since as we know, she is insanely smart, even outperforming Deku on the midterms in canon. And considering the archetype is named after a lot of historical figures, I figured this would fit for Momo. As for her ace, I decided on Triple D Doom King Armageddon. Tokiyami gets Black Wings, which is kind of self-explanatory, since it's the archetype that fits in the best. Tokiyami's ace card is Assault Blackwing Raikiri the Rain Shower. Oh, Chaco gets Fluffles, along with the Edge Imps and the Frightfur cards, as those two archetypes are needed to make the deck work. Why I picked the deck for her is I think that the deck really works with the themes of her character. Her ace is Frightfur Sabretooth. As well, Frightfur Chimera has higher attack points. I decided to have Chimera be her boss monster, so that left Sabretooth be with as the ace, as it's rather powerful due to it being able to bring back a Frightfur from the graveyard on summon, and gives all Frightfurs on your field an extra 400 attack points. Plus, it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects if it's special summoned with 3 materials. Ida's up next, and he's getting Speedroids. I don't really think I need to explain why. As for Ida's ace, I picked Clear Winged Synchro Dragon, since along with Crystal Winged Synchro Dragon, it's seen as the boss monster of the archetype. Tsuyu gets Frogs. I don't think I really need to explain why. And her ace is totally awesome, since it's easily the best frog card in the game. Mina gets Aliens, since they pretty much fit her whole aesthetic. As for her ace, I've picked Alien Mother, as it's the alien card with the highest attack points. Although I suppose it may have to act as her boss monster as well. Next up is Coda, and I know this is likely going to sound like a weird choice, but I decided to go with Gladiator Beasts for Coda, since his quirk allows him to communicate with and command animals in canon, and Gladiator Beasts were the best animal archetype that I could think of that isn't Tri-Brigade, as I'm saving that for someone else. As for his ace, I've picked Gladiator Beast Heraclinlos, however you pronounce that, as it's a rather powerful card that can be rather useful. Hence, it can negate a spell or trap that an opponent activates and destroy it, with the only cost being that Coda would have to discard a card from his hand. Kabanari's up next, and for his deck, I needed an archetype with a lot of firepower. So I decided to go with Thunder Dragons, with a few Battery Man cards tossed in. As for his ace, I decided on Thunder Dragon Colossus. And as I was writing the script, I know that Colossus is currently banned from official tournaments in the TCG. But if we're sticking with an archetype for these aces, it was either him or Thunder Dragon Titan. And I think the latter works better as his boss monster. Jiro's up next, and I decided to give her Melodious, as it's a music-themed archetype, and Jiro loves music, as we've seen with all the instruments in her dorm room and a school festival arc, where she put on the performance of a lifetime. As for her ace, I decided on Bloom Diva, the Melodious Choir, since while she doesn't have a lot of attack points, her effect is devastating. Hiroshima's up next, and for his deck, I needed something defensive and manly, so I decided on super heavy samurais due to their high defense and the fact that samurais are manly. As for his ace, I decided on super heavy samurai Big Ben K. Aoyama's up next, and for his deck, I decided on Gem Knights, since they look as flashy and flamboyant as him. As for his ace, I'm picking Gem Knight Master Diamond. Sato gets Madolches, since they're an archetype that steam their own sweets, and sweets end up helping Sato use his quirk and cannon, so I figured this would fit him perfectly. Sato's ace is Madolche Queen Tiramisu. Next up is Sero, and for his deck, I've picked X-Sabers. There's not a lot of archetypes that involve tape, so I'm using the closest thing we have, and that just so happens to be X-Sabers. Sero's ace is X-Saber Herbalum. Up next is Mineta, and for him, I've picked Amazonas. Since there isn't really an archetype that involves grapes, I decided to lean more towards his personality in terms of his deck of choice. Mineta's ace is Amazonas Empress. Next is Hagakure, and for her deck, I decided to go with Counter Fairies, which can help support other fairy archetypes like the Agents and the Parshath cards. Plus, thanks to one of their monsters, this archetype can allow her to use cards like Solemn Judgment without paying any life points. As for her ace, I've picked Sacred Arc Aeronite Parshath, due to the fact that it can search out counter traps with its effect. Next is Ojiro, and I've picked the Dual Avatar archetype for him, since it's an archetype that I focus on martial arts, and martial arts is pretty much his whole gimmick. As for his ace, I've picked Dual Avatar Empowered Kongyo, as it's the cover card for the archetype. Lastly, for Class 1A, we have Shoji, and his deck was rather tricky to decide, but I eventually decided to go with a ninja deck, since ninjas fit Shoji's hero outfit, and he doesn't really have enough personality to go off of here. His ace is Blade Armor Ninja. Now that we've wrapped up Class 1A, let's get into Class 1B. Since while they don't show up too often, I think they're still important enough to give decks to. And we'll go in seat order, just to make things easier, as we're starting off with Awase, as I've picked the Magnet Warrior archetype, since his quirk is Weld, which can allow the user to merge things, both organic and inorganic at a subatomic level, and since the Magnet Warriors can merge together, I think it's a good fit. As for his ace, I've picked two cards, being Valkyrion, the Magna Warrior, and Berserkion, the Electro Magna Warrior. Next up is Kaibara, and his deck was rather tricky, since there isn't a lot to go off of in terms of archetypes for his quirk, and we haven't seen enough of his personality aside from that. So I decided to pick Centurion, since considering and what we had to go off of his character, I think this deck fits. Kaibara's ace is Centurion Anoxila. Kamakiri is up next, and I decided to give him both the Bee Trooper and Battle Wasp archetypes, and this is mainly due to his insect-like appearance. Kamakiri's ace is Heavy Bee Trooper Mighty Neptune. Kurohiro is next, and he is getting Dark Worlds, since I think it fits him due to the nature of his quirk. As for his ace, I've picked Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World. Kendo's up next, and fun fact, she is actually my personal favorite member of 1A. Not really important to the video, I just thought y'all like to know. Anyway, for her deck, I wanted our archetype with a martial arts theme, and I decided to pick Sword Soul, since it matches our theme and has a lot of firepower, so I'd say it fits her quite well. Her ace will be Sword Soul Grandmaster Jiyao, and I probably just butchered that name, so I do apologize for that. Kodai is up next, and for her archetype, it's a bit tricky since, like with a lot of 1B, there's not a lot we can go off of. So I've picked Cosmo, since they somewhat have size in the theme. As for Ace, I picked Cosmo Dark Lady. Komori's getting Trap Tricks. I don't think I really need to explain why. Her Ace is Trap Trick Sarah. Kiyozaki's getting Black Rose. Considering the nature of her quirk, I figured a plant deck would fit, and I don't think Preta plants would fit her personality. Her Ace is kind of obvious, with it being Black Rose Dragon. Chishida is getting Dangers. I don't think I really need to explain why, with his Ace being Danger Bigfoot. Shota is getting Cyber Dragons, since I think they fit his whole aesthetic, with his Ace being Cyber Twin Dragon, due to it fitting perfectly with his Twin Impact quirk. Pony's getting Valkyries, since they're horses, and the fact they kind of like anime characters. And apparently, Pony is a big fan of anime, so I'd say, hey, they fit quite well. With her Ace being Valkyrie Brunhild. Tsuburama's up next, with him getting Cloudians, since there isn't a lot we can do with an air solidification quirk. So since Cloudian is the closest thing we've got to that, that's what I'll go with. His Ace is Cloudian, Eye of the Typhoon. Tetsu is up next, and I decided on 6 samurais for him. Since it's a samurai archetype, like the deck I gave to Kirishima earlier, and since we're going off the fact that his and Kirishima's quirks and fighting styles are very similar, I decided to give him the other samurai archetype. His Ace will be legendary 6 samurai Shien. Hokage gets Dinomorphia, and she likes dinosaurs, and it's somewhat similar to her quirk. Her Ace is Dinomorphia Stuffburgia. Ukidashi's getting Super Quantums, since I wanted to have a somewhat comic theme for his deck, and since I'm planning on giving heroes to All Might, Super Quantums end up filling the bill the best. His Ace will be Super Quantum Mech King Great Magnus. Onanuki gets Gradles. There isn't a lot to go off of in terms of his personality or the archetypes that fit his quirk, so I picked Gradles. His Ace is Gradle Dragon. Bondo is getting Vylon, since it has a lot of Yugen monsters, which can kind of work with his glue focus quirk. His Ace is Vylon Omega. Monama's up next, and he doesn't really have a deck of his own, he just net decks the best ones. I figured this would fit, since his quirk is copy. Since he doesn't have a deck to call his own, he really doesn't have an Ace. Yanagi is getting Ghostrix, and since her whole thing is ghosts, her Ace is Ghostrick Angel of Mischief. Lastly, for 1B, we have Rin, and since his quirk involves scales, I decided on a dragon archetype for him, and I chose Red Eyes, as his Ace is Red Eyes Black Dragon. That wraps up 1A and 1B, but we still have 2 more first years to cover, that being Shinso and Hatsume. Their decks are as follows. Shinso gets Relinquished, with his Ace obviously being Relinquished. Hatsume gets Machina, with her Ace being Machina Fortress. Relinquished can steal the opponent's monsters, similar to Shinso's Brainwashing quirk, and Machina fits, since Hatsume loves working on gadgets and machines. Now, before we start covering the teachers and the pro heroes, let's get the big 3 out of the way, as we'll start with Mirio, and we're giving him Floenderies, as they're rather similar to Mirio's Permeation quirk, with his Ace being Floenderies and Snowl. Nejire's up next, and she's getting Dragon Maids, with this being a somewhat reference to Ryukyu, and the fact that there isn't really an archetype that resembles her quirk that I can think of, her Ace being House Dragon Maid. Lastly, for the big 3 is Tamaki, and he'll be getting Tri-Brigade, since it's a deck with a massive amount of firepower, and I think it fits well with his Manifest quirk. Tamaki's Ace will be Tri-Brigade Shurig, the Ominous Omen. Now the students are wrapped up, let's get into the pro heroes. And we're starting with the number 1 hero and symbol of peace, All Might. All Might, like I said earlier, is getting heroes, as it's quite literally the perfect archetype for him. And I know people think it would suit Deku more, although I thought Synchron's would fit with One for All more. All Might's ace will be Elemental Hero Sunrise, since it gives all your monsters an extra 200 attack points for every attribute of monster on your field. And it gives you a free Miracle Fusion on summon. Plus, Sunrise's horns kind of look like All Might's hair. Endeavor is up next, and he's getting Fire Kings. And I know people will say, why didn't you give Salamangreats to Endeavor? I gave Salamangreats to Shoto because Shoto was created to one day surpass Endeavor and All Might. So I figured giving Shoto a stronger fire archetype made sense. Enji's ace will be Fire King High Avatar Garunix. Aizawa's getting Psyframes, is it's a deck with the most negates in the game, so it works perfectly with Erasure. His ace being Psyframe Lord Omega. President Mike is up next, and he'll be getting the Orchest archetype, due to it being a music-themed archetype, and Mike's a radio personality in his spare time. Orchestrion will be his ace monster. Midnight's getting Dark Lords. Since their look kinda matches Midnight, her ace is Dark Lord Superbia. Power Lorder gets Infinitrack. I don't think I really need to explain why. His ace is Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops. Mirko gets Lunalights, kinda self-explanatory, as her ace is Lunalight Panther Dancer. Nezu gets Ritual Beasts. I was considering Monarchs for him, although I'm saving them for All for One. So I think this is the best archetype that can fit him. Nezu's ace will be Ritual Beast Ulti Galapello. Hawks gets Rave Raptors, as this archetype fits Hawks perfectly in my honest opinion. Plus, he could run a Blackwing sub-engine as a homage to his relationship with Tokoyami. Hawks will have Rave Raptor Rise Falcon as his ace. Selkie's getting Mermails, since I think it fits well due to it being a water-themed archetype. And Selkie is primarily a water-focused hero, as his quirk that gives him the ability to have Spotted Seal. His ace will be Mermail Abyss Megalo. Sir Night-Eye is up next, and he'll be getting the Ally of Justice archetype, due to him being All Might's former sidekick, and the fact that there isn't really that many archetypes that work with Foresight. His ace will be Ally of Justice Decisive Armor. Amui Woods is getting Predaplants, since due to his wood-based quirk, he needs a plant-themed archetype. And since I gave Black Rose to Shiozaki earlier, I figured I'd give him Predaplants. His ace is Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Since it's mainly the boss monster for the Predaplant archetype, Snipe gets Rockets, and the Borlo Dragons, which is kind of self-explanatory due to the gun theme of the archetype. His ace will be Borlo Dragon. Backum will be getting a Novels/Recipe archetype, due to the nature of his quirk requiring him to consume a massive amount of food to use his quirk properly. His ace will be Real de Novels. I probably just butchered that name. Ryukyu's get Blue Eyes. Due to her dragon quirk, Ryukyu getting a dragon archetype makes perfect sense. Her ace will obviously be Blue Eyes White Dragon. 13 gets Galaxy Eyes. Considering the space theme of her outfit and quirk, Galaxy Eyes makes perfect sense. 13's ace is Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. Flag King gets Rescue Ace, as I couldn't really think of any blood-related archetypes that weren't vampires, and since I'm saving those for Toga, I had to go with something else. His ace is Rescue Ace Turbulence. Hound Dog gets Dogs, kind of self-explanatory there. And his ace is Sumo King Dog. Ectoplasm gets Math Mechs. He's a math teacher, so it's kind of self-explanatory. Plus, there were really a lot of archetypes that could work well with his quirk. His ace is Geo Math Mech Final Sigma. The Mentok has Pyramid. I don't think I really need to explain why. His ace is Pyramid Sphinx. Gran Torino gets Tech Genius, as I think it fits with his jet quirk, and it also fits with his role in the story of teaching Deku how to excel synchro. His ace is Tech Genius Blade Blaster. And now that the heroes are done, let's get into the final selection of decks and effects for this video, with the villains. And let's start with the symbol of fear himself, All for One. And he'll be getting the Monarch archetype, which honestly fits him perfectly, with his ace being Erebus, the Underworld Monarch. Shigaraki's up next, and he's getting Burning Abyss, since I think it can fit the Decay quirk Ricky has quite well. Plus, it can be upgraded to PK Fire once he gets access to the All-for-One quirk. His ace is Dante, Traveler of the Burning Abyss. Davi gets Phantom Knights, which is kind of self-explanatory, with his ace being Dark Rebellion XZ's Dragon. His Dark Rebellion is basically the boss monster of Phantom Knights. Toga gets Vampires, again, kinda self-explanatory. Her ace will be Crimson Knight Vampire Bram. Twice gets Adventurer tokens. Since his quirk is double, I figured a deck that would produce a lot of tokens would make sense for him. His ace will be Magicore Warrior of the Relics. Then gets Shiranui. I wanted to give him a weapon-themed deck and also a zombie-themed deck due to being inspired by Stain. His ace will be Shiranui Sun Saga. Stain gets Vendreads. With him being the hero killer, I figured having an archetype that has beef with the hero archetype in lore would make perfect sense. His ace will be Revendread Slayer. Overhaul gets ABCs. Due to the nature of Overhaul as a quirk, this archetype fits perfectly. Plus, I may also give him the rest of the Alphabet Union cards. His ace will be ABC Dragon Buster. Muscular gets Gokis. With Muscular's quirk and personality, I think they fit him. His ace will be Goki the Giant Ogre. Magna gets Metal Foes. I don't think I need to explain why, as her ace is Metal Foes Vanisher. Gentle Criminal gets Dark Magician. I decided on his archetype due to his outfit. His ace will obviously be Dark Magician. La Brava is getting Magician Girls. I decided to give her this archetype, since I want Gentle and La Brava to be kind of a tag team duo. And since the Magician Girls work so well together with Dark Magician. Their ace is Dark Magician Girl. Lady Nagant gets the Magical Musket archetype. It's another archetype that involves guns, and since Nagant's quirk lets her turn her arm into a literal sniper rifle, I thought it would fit well. Her ace is Magical Musketeer Max. Compress gets Cleforts. I was considering Performa Pals for him due to the magician theme of his outfit, although a viewer thought Performa Pals wouldn't work for a villain. His ace is Apoclefort Towers. Kuragiri gets Cubics, which I think could work for all the Nomus. His ace is Crimson Nova Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord. 9 gets the Weather due to his weather manipulation quirk. His ace is the Weather Painter Moonbow. Mustard gets Venom. Since Mustard's gas is poisonous, I figured this would work. His ace is Phenomenon, the King of Poisonous Snakes. Wolfram gets Ancient Gears. Don't think I really need to explain why. His ace is obviously Ancient Gear Golem. Lectern gets Dream Mirrors along with the Mirror Force cards, since his quirk can reflect anything thrown at him. Lectern gets 2 ace cards, with Oneros, the Dream Mirror Circling, and Oneros, the Dream Mirror Tormentor. Redestro is up next, and he'll be getting the Labyrinth archetype, considering Labyrinths are stressful, and his quirk weaponizes stress, so I figured this would fit. His ace will be Lady Labyrinth of the Silver Castle. And lastly, for the decks, we have Gigantomachia, and he'll be getting War Rocks. with his ace being Warrock Bashilos. And that's all I'll cover for this part. So what did you guys think of the decks and aces? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, I'll get on out of here. Peace!